A relationship with the right referral partner could be a game changer for any B2B company. So what if you could reverse engineer these relationships at a moment's notice? Start a podcast, invite potential referral partners to be guests on your show, and grow your referral network faster than ever. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm James Carberry.
And I'm Jonathan Green.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. Today we are joined by Laura Klein. Laura is the founder of Users Know. She's also the author of Build Better Products and UX for Lean Startups. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and you have this incredible wealth of information when it comes to user experience across the board. But kind of before we get into today's topic, user experience in the B2B space, tell us a little about what you and the Users Know team are up to, and a little about your book. Or both books, whatever one you think would be most valuable for our listeners today.
I always recommend both, the Build Better Products and always buy a fresh copy, if you want to read it again. No, but the Build Better Products book is my most recent book, so it's my most recent thinking, and it's more aimed teams that are working in larger companies and it's full of actionable activities that teams can run together to make sure that we're all building the same product and that we're actually fulfilling company goals as well as user goals, which is always a nice thing. Mm-hmm. UX for Lean Startup is really more focused on entrepreneurs and very, very, very small teams, maybe as small as one, and people who can make independent product decisions. And it's very Lean Startup focused, obviously, hence the name. And it's very much about validating new product ideas, trying to get into brand new markets and make brand new things. So whichever one applies best to you, that is the one to read.
Great.
And right now I'm actually busy building products as a head of product for a small company with very large clients.
Perfect. Like I said, you've got a lot of expertise in this world. I think you're exactly the right person to come on the show and talk to us today kind of about user experience in the B2B space. I mean, you've said that this is being adopted by at large companies, but there are problems there. There are growing pains there. Maybe you can unpack that a little bit for us.
Well, it's always so hard to say, now large companies or now enterprise software is starting to think about user experience design, because there were a few, I think, that have been thinking about it all along. And that is not true of the majority of companies. And there are still some that haven't really sort of bought into this whole user experience design thing and who are still, wondering, well, what does it all mean? How would we do it? But what I will say is that I think the expectations of the way software works at large organizations has changed fundamentally. I think that as people in their everyday lives adopt more technology and start using, iPhones and Rokus and all sorts of, everybody's, watches Netflix, and everybody feels like they're used to this technology that just kind of works. Mm-hmm. And I think that then they go to the office and they use technology that maybe doesn't just work, or that needs a lot of training or needs a lot of support, or
right.
just, it's just hard, right?
Yeah, it's not as intuitive. It feels clunkier.
Yeah, and I think that people are starting to say, no, this is absurd. We've proven that we can make good technology that is easy for people to use. Why aren't we doing that with the things that we have to use every day for, 8 or 10 hours a day at a time? And so, it's important. I mean, all the UX designers like to focus on the sexy consumer stuff, but I'm like, no, this stuff has a real impact on people's everyday lives. And I think, I'm glad that some companies are starting to move toward making things that really solve problems for people in large organizations, but that feel more like something that you would want to use.
Right. You actually you look forward to opening it up and using it, and the user experience, it can be very easy for you. But when we are talking about working within a large company framework, you had mentioned that there are some problems. There are some problems with, maybe your sales team wanting one thing and that creating certain problems, or working within a silo and different teams not being able to communicate with each other, or certain people wanting things that are going to complicate the code. What are some of these problems that you're going to be dealing with working within this large company framework?
So anybody who has ever built products for a large company, whether you work at a large company or you're just building something for somebody at a very large organization, has run into certain problems. One of those is that very large companies tend to spend a lot of money on rolling software out to all of their users, and that means that they can be a little bit demanding. And by a little bit, I mean incredibly. And, depending on the size of your company and just depending on how much power you have in those negotiations, if you're building a product as a product manager or UX designer, anybody, you can get a lot of demands from companies that are, paying you $1 million a year. And I think that's reasonable to expect. They're paying you $1 million a year. They want the thing to do the thing they wanted to do. Okay, sure. If I were paying $1 million a year for something, I might have some recommendations. Mm-hmm. But that can be really, really tough as a UX designer or product manager, because it means that sometimes you're saying no to a salesperson who's saying, this will make us $200,000 more this quarter. And that's a super hard thing to be able to say. But sometimes it's important, because what is just adding a lot of one-off ad hoc features that are requests from very big companies can turn your product into a giant mess. That is one of the things that makes this legacy B2B software so unbelievably hard to use and unbelievably hard to fix. You end up with this code base that has a million different variations for, a few hundred different clients. It becomes very hard to maintain. It becomes very hard to use. All of a sudden, you have to put in all this configuration, because it's like, well, are we turning that feature on or off for this particular client, or does everybody have to see it? And then everybody's only using 10% of it. And these are tough choices to make when you're a product manager. Do you say, or a UX designer, do you say no to $200,000 this quarter in order to, maintain your perfectly curated artisanal product? Or do you say, yeah, okay, and maybe you have to deal with it a year from now?
Yeah. So what about then, I guess, including different teams? When do you include marketing? When do you include legal? When is that important when we're building out this user experience?
Yeah, that's super tricky, because of course, I just finished saying how we need to ignore sales, which we don't. By the way, we do not need to ignore sales. That is 100% not what I am saying. Sometimes we need to say no to sales, or sometimes we need to say, but what about this other thing to sales? Or sometimes we need to say, hey, go sell this other thing. That's fine. But you're right. Sales isn't the only, group that's going to come to us and say, hey, we need a widget. We need a super widget. Everybody's got something that they want and some reason that they want it. Legal has a lot of input. Marketing has a lot of say. And marketing is interesting because not only do they have a lot of say, but they have to know what we're building in order to be able to sell it. And also, they've got a lot of great input about what sells that we should maybe be taking into account. They are often some of the ones who are actually studying what's working, what messages are actually useful in the marketplace. What are people responding to? And that can be an incredibly powerful tool, which means that we have to be bringing all of these groups in as early as possible. I will say that I have seen often a desire to keep those groups out of things while we're building the thing, but they will have all of these things that they want, and then we will have to build all of them. No. What we need to do is we need to come together as early as possible, hopefully in a cross-functional team, and understand what everybody's needs are and then use that to create something holistic, use that to create something that actually fits together and works as a whole product that isn't just a weird collection of a bunch of different features that 17 different groups asked for.
Right, just a horrific Frankenstein amalgamation of stitched together the hopes and dreams and desires, right.
Yes, I'm afraid that some of the listeners are probably out there sort of like twitching and curling up into a ball because they've run into these before, either as a user or as a creator. And nothing is more frustrating than taking this product that, you built and that you worked really hard on and then just bolting something onto the side of it because you didn't think of it early enough or you didn't take something into consideration or, you just had to sort of destroy the thing that made it great because you didn't think about everybody's needs early enough.
Yeah. I'd like to take this opportunity to address the needs of the marketers that we have in our audience, because you had made this point earlier offline that I loved, about user research, getting to know your user, but more than that, the marketing side really knows your customer, but your customer is not always your user. Can we talk about that real quick?
Oh yes. I think that we should talk about this constantly all the time if we build and sell to large companies. User experience designers, I think, are, we practice a thing called user-centered design, hopefully, if we're any good at that. And I think that we tend to get very focused on, no. What are the use cases? What are the needs of the person who is the end user of the product? And that is great, and we should definitely think about those folks. However, often at these large companies, maybe the CIO is purchasing or at least influencing the decision for, say, call center software, right? Just as an example. That CIO is almost certainly never going to use that call center.
He's not at the call center, right?
Yeah, or if the CIO is using it, they're looking at a special management dashboard that nobody else sees. So that's fine. That's important. We just need to know who all the players are and, what their needs are as well. There are users too, even if they're not using our software. They kind of are, right? Their organization is using the software in order to achieve a goal of the person who's writing the check. So when we think about it, the customer is the person who writes the check and the user is the person who is forced to use the product. And sometimes those are the same people. And it can be very tempting, I think, on the part of sales and marketing to overfocus on the customer because they're the ones who write the check. They seem like the most important. But one thing that I will say is we need to also focus on the users these days in ways that we kind of didn't as much before. Because, see, these companies, that CIO has a lot of options. And if that CIO is not getting what they want out of the software, or if what they're getting out of the software is a lot of complaints and a lot of dropped calls from their call center, then they're not going to renew, right? They're going to say, well, we're going to try this other version of the software.
Yeah.
And that can be a huge, huge problem for us. So I think that what we need to do is we need to do a better job of sharing information about this is who the customer is, this is who the user is. They are both important. We need to understand the needs of both. We need to understand how each one is using the product in order to do their job and be better at their job. I always like to think about, how does this product make this person better? For the CIO, it might make them better by reducing the call volume and, lowering costs by 30%. That's fantastic. That's a great goal. It's a very obvious metric that we can track to. For the user, maybe it's making them better at their job by making them able to handle more calls at a time or able to, skip calls entirely. Whatever it is, able to handle it by text. I don't know. Or able to know more about the customer, make the customer happier. How is this product making the user happy? The other thing, of course, that we have to think about is, in this particular instance, there's an entirely different user that we're not even talking about, which is the end user, the person who's buying the stuff from the company that we're selling to. So our customer's customer.
Yeah.
And, none of us ever think of that that person. He just gets ignored all the time. But these are important things to think about. And like I said, marketing, I think, is fantastic at knowing what messages are resonating with the decision maker.
Yep.
And I think that UX designers tend to, be very good at understanding the needs and how the user is interacting with the software or hardware or whatever it is. And that's fantastic. But I think we need to share that information more widely so that we can do things like, have consistent messaging and build things that work for both groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the key to every successful relationship, communication. So
yeah.
I think, it makes a lot of sense. Laura, this has been some fantastic content. If any of our listeners are interested in communicating more with you or finding out more about Users Know or finding out more about your books, what's the best way for them to go about getting a hold of you?
So I have a website at usersknow.com. That is users, K-N-O-W, not users know, which would be their user hostile. And so I am available there. I am also on Twitter at Laura Klein. And you can reach me in either of those places. And the books are available just, on Amazon or wherever you purchase books, which is Amazon.
Perfect. Well, we'll try and include definitely then a link to the books on the show notes so you can check it out there. And Laura, thanks again so much for your time today. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
If you're a B2B marketer, we want to feature you on sites like the Huffington Post, Social Media Examiner, and Chief Marketer. Every week, we send out a question related to B2B marketing. We use the responses to those questions to fuel the content we write for really popular websites. So head over to sweetfishmedia.com/questions and sign up today.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.